Kia ora, everyone, and welcome back to Stripped and Unscripted. I'm VIXEN Temple.
And I am Madeline.
And thank you so much to everyone who has been supporting our show. We are so overwhelmed and stoked with the feedback we've been getting, especially on our most recent episode, Respectability, Politics, and Tone Policing Anger. Really sad to see that so many people can relate, but, you know, that's the thing. That's why we're here to talk about it, so that people can be conscious of what's going on. So we have gathered here today to talk about our pole foot law. We have some question prompts here to keep us, to try and keep our ADHD brains in a bit of a flow. But yeah, we'll see what happens. So I'm going to ask Madeline, how did you get into pole fit?
How did I get into pole fit? Okay, this is such a long-winded story, but I didn't actually properly get into pole fit until after I had started stripping. I used to train at a handstand calisthenics parkour gym. Yes, I have done parkour before. Please, no comments on that. But I had a friend there who owned a pole studio. She was actually one of my instructors. Some of you will know Coco. If you're in the NZ pole scene, you'll know Coco. She is a fucking legend, all-around awesome person. And me being super, super uninformed and uneducated on anything to do with sex work, went to Coco and was like, oh my God, I want to be a stripper. At the time, I had two small businesses that had just started to be super impacted by COVID and all of that good stuff. And yeah, she basically was like, you'd be really good at it. Like, you're really, what's the word? Charismatic. And I was like, yay, yes, of course I am. I would be wonderful. Not knowing anything about what I was actually getting myself into. But I basically organized myself a trial, and the first time I ever got on a pole was the first time I ever got naked at the strip club as well. So pretty balls to the wall. I did not have a single clue what I was doing on the pole. So yeah, the intersection of those two experiences happening at once was definitely interesting. I remember coming off stage and saying to one of the girls that I had literally just met, like, how did I do? How did I do? And she just looked me in my face and said, you need to slow down. And I honestly was just like mortified in the moment. I was like, oh my sweet Lord. But I obviously kept doing it. I realized pretty quickly that I was totally in love. I have a background in competitive dance and cheer for most of my childhood and teen years, so I definitely already had a pretty good level of flexibility and dance experience, and so it felt super natural to me to combine all of that with pole and stripping. So yeah, I fell in love. Coco really, really kindly gave me her stage pole. So I drove into the middle of the CBD, which is where her studio was, and we picked up her stage pole. And if you've ever touched a stage pole, you'll know that they are truly the worst object to ever exist in this world. And we lugged it all the way back to my house. Coco installed it for me, or set it up, and yeah, I was away. I just went such insane levels of autism, ADHD, hyperfocus, and ended up pole dancing every day for a very long time. I had a crazy fast progression, which, looking back at it, wasn't great. At the time, I was really proud of myself, and I was really, really, really lucky with the way that my body handled it, given that I had such a background. But yeah, it was crazy fast. And yeah, I got really advanced really quickly, and girls at the club started to comment on my dancing, and customers started to comment on my dancing, and I sort of got to this level where what I was trying to do on the pole was getting a little sketchy. It wasn't that I was necessarily doing it dangerously, but I just knew the level I was at was sort of getting a bit hectic. And so I looked into going to a studio, and I I did go and do one class at a studio, and I just sort of realized quite quickly that what was being taught in that specific class was not transferable to the club. It was a great class. There was nothing wrong with the class, and I was treated pretty well. It was just not transferable at all. It wasn't stuff that I would have used at the club. And yeah, I guess like as someone going in there looking for help to go on a strip club stage, it just wasn't that for me. And so I continued to self-train, sort of figure it out on my own. And with being self-taught and genuinely having to figure it out all on my own and kind of trial and error and kind of making my own way through all of the skills that I wanted, it gave me this, yeah, I guess I felt so in tune with my body and the pole and how to figure out how to do things. And it gave me this, yeah, I guess like unique understanding of how I was dancing and how pole dancing works mechanically. And I've always been a movement nerd. I've always been into like dynamic style of movement. And so I just, yeah, really quickly was like, I want to teach this. And I remember being very, I remember really wanting to learn stripper style from people and having a really hard time finding it in the area that I'm in. There's a lot of sexy style pole, a lot of showgirl style pole, a lot of like pole fitness style sexy pole. But I had a really hard time finding S-work instructors that were teaching like really authentic stripper style. And that's not to say that there weren't any. I just personally had a hard time finding them. And so I kind of felt like I really, really wanted to teach that. I really wanted to teach that like just gooey, yummy, slow, like fluid kind of movement. And that's kind of how my first few workshops were born. And they were very authentic stripper style. And that was actually my first entry into pole fitness was when I started to take workshops. I had taught strippers in the club a lot. I had taught, yeah, strippers across the country at the club. But I had not been into the pole fitness space. And I definitely for a long time was desperately trying to make connections and friends in the pole industry in Auckland, and I had a really hard time doing it. And I didn't actually get my first pole fitness job until, God, when would it have been? It would have been, what are we, 2025? Maybe 2021, 2022. It was the opening of my home studio, which is Circuit Pole Studio in East Tamaki, who gave me my first like permanent instructor job. But yeah, that's my beginning lore. How about you, Vixen?
I kind of have a similar story of how I got into pole fit. So it was before I was a stripper. It was 2018, and I was in my final year at university studying a Bachelor of Arts, and I had an acquaintance that did pole fit. There was this studio because I grew up in Ōtepoti, Dunedin. There was one pole fit studio, and it was owned and operated by a retired stripper, and she was so gorgeous and incredible. And they used to do a lot of student showcases, and I went along and saw my friend do, they did a Moulin Rouge student showcase, because I don't know what it is about pole fit and loving to dance to Roxanne from the Moulin Rouge. So I went along and I saw my friend do pole fit, and it was obviously more the like tricks and all of that. And I was like, like the big, like very circus style movement. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, what a cool way to get fit and strong. And I love this. But then I had also, prior to that, throughout studying at university, a few friends of mine would sometimes go to the strip club. And I remember noticing the difference between how strippers at the club danced on the pole versus the student showcases I would go to for pole fit. And I was definitely a lot more attracted to the stripper style of it all. the sensuality, the feminine dance, the ritualistic performance, if you will. I always say that my first time in the strip club, it felt like the closest thing I've ever experienced to being in Aphrodite's temple. So I started in my last year of university. I was really flirting with the idea of becoming a stripper because it's something I wanted to be since I was a little girl that that's something I'd probably do one day. And I was studying theater at university, and Maddie May, the icon, the legend, was also studying theater at university, same one as me. She was a few years older than me, and she did the show at the strip club for Fringe Festival, How to Be a Stripper. And I went along to that, and I just thought, I mean, if you've seen Maddie May perform or dance in any way, you know what I'm talking about. It is a religious experience, if I may say so. And I just remember seeing her perform and being like, fuck, she's so cool, and she's so sexy, and she's so awesome, and you know, she doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks. She's so proud and loud about being a stripper, and she doesn't give a fuck. And that inspired me to finally be like, you know what? I'm going to fucking do it. I'm going to be a stripper. So I signed up to a pole fit class, and my pole fit instructor ended up later becoming my strip club manager. She's the one, if you listen to the last episode, that said I was fucked in the head from having an abortion. She was the worst strip club manager I've had of all the clubs I've danced at in Aotearoa, but more on that in a future episode. So yeah, I started doing pole fit with my flatmates at the time. They were friends of mine from high school who later would stop being friends with me when I became a stripper, which is so ironic. Like, they were okay to do pole fit with me, but the second I became a stripper, they ghosted me. But anyways, I started doing pole fit, and I thought this is really cool, and I really enjoyed it, but I noticed it was a lot more fitness side. And I loved that. I was progressing quite quickly. I loved how strong I felt. I have disabilities, so I've always wanted to be physically strong, but it's just something that hasn't always come so easy to me because of my disabilities. But I got toned really quickly, and I started developing muscle, and I felt so feminine and so empowered doing it. But I really wanted to I really was keen to do the more like sensual stripper side of it. And so when I did eventually start working as a stripper in December of 2018, I remember my first time dancing. Oh God, you could not pay me to watch my first stage spot, because fuck, I know, I can remember it so clearly. I was trying way too hard because my pole fit instructor was the strip club manager. I was trying way too hard to do pole fit instead of being sexy. And so I'm on stage, and I am trying way too hard to like get my invert down and to like do.
Sorry, I can't not laugh at you, eh?
It's so cringe to think about. And I wasn't being sexy at all. I was doing pole fit, and oh God, it's so embarrassing. So I get off the stage, and I run up to my pole fit instructor / now my manager, and I'm like, oh my God, like, what did you think? And she was like, yeah, you did great. I'm proud of you, but like, show a little less asshole. We don't need to see what you had for breakfast.
What?
I don't know.
That's kind of the point.
I know. So I'm so like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know. It was a confusing experience, but whatever. So yeah, that was how I got into pole fit. And then, it's quite interesting. I'll probably talk about this more as the episode goes on, but my pole fit instructor, who was now my manager, her treatment of me changed very quickly from when I was a student doing pole fit to when I was now a student who was also a stripper. Yeah, that's how I got into pole fit. It was with the intention of becoming a stripper, but I realized very quickly, now that I was stripping, fuck man, like pole fit has like fucking 5% of the job. Like, it's all about, you know, like you said, like Coco said that you were charismatic. That's a big part of it. Yeah, very similar story to yours. I was doing pole fit and thought, you know, I'm gonna be a stripper, and then realized really quickly it's not the fucking same thing. So those are our stories of how we got into pole fit. Now the next question we have here, I actually really like this question. So what is your favorite thing about pole and pole fit?
My favorite thing about pole and pole fit, I'm going to answer this question through two lenses. I want to answer it my favorite thing for me, and I want to answer it like my favorite thing as a community kind of thing. My favorite thing about it for myself is just the way that it is like such a honest and raw and vulnerable expression of like my heart and soul. Like my dancing is, and someone commented this on one of my videos recently, and I've never been more obsessed with a comment that I've read ever, but it was like, I imagine this is what it looks like to see like a heart ripped open in dancing form. And I was just like, oh, like, yeah, that is so much how it feels for me. For me, it is like such a time of like processing. Like while I'm dancing, I'm getting things out that I otherwise maybe would have a really hard time getting out. And it's not just my sexy, sensual style of dance that I do that. It's everything. It's in my spin. It is just like I feel very vulnerable about my art and my dancing. And when you see me dancing, what you're seeing is like the processing of like everything that has ever happened to me. And it's sort of through this lens of the strip club and my learning how to dance in the strip club, and that being, yeah, like, this, I can't even quite explain it, but it's just so wildly cathartic for me to dance and to move and to just be that version of myself. I guess I do feel like it is like the most raw and vulnerable version of myself. And yeah, just, oh, fuck, like, I could almost get emotional talking about it, which I'll try not to do, because I won't do that. But, then my thing that I love about it, my favorite thing about it for, the community. Now, we'll talk about this obviously, and it's not to say that the community isn't sometimes problematic, because Lord knows it absolutely is, and that's pretty much why we have this podcast. But as an instructor and sort of observing students coming in, the one thing that pole does is creates community. It creates friendships, and it creates this space where women can kind of come and do the thing, and it's judgment free for the most part for civilian women. I just really love to see the way that people are able to come in there and like be a part of this group. Do you know what I mean? It's not flawless. It's definitely problematic a lot of the time, and I know the stripper experience is very different, but I do notice that a lot of people really find like a sense of self and a sense of belonging, and I love that for people. You know, it is so hard to find a place that you think that you belong, and so watching people like experience that with pole and build friendships and connections with others that otherwise you wouldn't experience in a regular like fitness space, I think that's really beautiful. And you know, you can see it everywhere, you know, the way that groups and pole studios become besties, and there's events that happen at the pole studio that, you know, aren't just, we're doing this workout thing this weekend. It's like an actual group of friends that actually like each other and actually hang out, and it becomes more than just a gym. It becomes like, yeah, a friendship group in a sense. And again, this is not to say that it's not problematic, because like I said, we know it is. And it's not always, but yeah, I love seeing people like make friends in layman's terms, if you get what I mean. Yeah. How about you, Vixen?
Oh my gosh, that was so romantic. I loved everything you just said. Okay, well, sorry, I just need to take that all in, because that was really, really beautiful. I loved hearing your thoughts as an instructor, because that's something I have never experienced, so I think that's so gorgeous. Yeah, Namahi, everything you said. So, especially, okay, I'll answer in a similar aspect of like what I love about it for myself. So, I understand completely what you were saying. For me, dance is a form of meditation, as I know it is for you. Dance is, I once read somewhere that people who have ADHD, like we can't meditate just sitting down. You know, we need movement. And for me, I'm the same when I am dancing, whether it's on a pole or like just at home doing floor work. Oh God, I love floor work. I am also processing emotions because as we see in a lot of Indigenous communities, you know, you and I being tangata whenua, dance is a means of storytelling. And it's another way of it literally, like there is science behind it. It does actually move energy throughout your body, and it is a way of processing things. And so for me, and I'm sure you're the same, when I am pole dancing especially, oh my gosh, it is so feminine, and not in the, you know, like cis woman feminine thing. Like it's the essence, it's the mana, it's the energy. For me, it's connecting to the goddess. So, you know, I've mentioned that I'm a spiritual person. I do a lot of deity practice. I hosted a workshop at a pole studio not that long ago, actually, called Channeling the Divine Through Dance. And I talked about how historically in, you know, matriarchal societies, dance was used as a way to channel the goddess. And it was very ritualistic. And, you know, like I just said, when I was in the strip club, I felt like I was in Aphrodite's temple. It feels like when I am dancing, I have opened this portal between me and the energy, the mana, if you will, of just the earth, of Mother Nature, of the goddess, as I would refer to it. And I just think that sensual femininity is so powerful and so, you know, like you can't spell esoteric without erotic, and erotic energy for me is so, it's demonized for a reason. It's because it's so fucking powerful. And so when I am pole dancing, when I'm doing floor work, it just, I feel like I am tapping into this fucking sacred essence that patriarchy wants to squash out of me. And it just feels so powerful. And you touched on something that I have a lot of, I'd say, beautiful thoughts around. You know, you said with the community, how you love to see just ordinary people come in and feel that. I think there's something to be noted there, how interesting it is that there are so many like women or trans or men that come in to do pole fit, right? And, you know, you ask them, why did you pick pole fit? And they more than often will always say, I wanted an exercise that could help me feel good in my body and was, you know, feminine or sensual or something. It is the feminine sensuality of it all that attracts people to pole fit, because it is started by strippers. And I recently did an interview with the Massey University Student Magazine about pole fit, and she also asked me this question, what is your favorite thing about pole fit? And I said to her, my favorite thing is that it's this form of dance that came from a place of women's survival. And over time, it has evolved into something that, whether or not we agree with it or not, civilians have access to empower themselves. I think it's so fascinating that something that society says is taboo and degrading is something that so many people are attracted to reclaim their body. And, you know, that's why we get bothered when, like, especially women are like, strippers are degrading and anti-feminist, but I do pole fit to reclaim my femininity. Like, the fuck? So if you're someone that can, like, just honor that the reason you do pole fit is because you are attracted to that feminine sensuality that came from stripping and strippers learning to survive, I love you for that. I appreciate that, because that's what it is. Pole fit is this, it was born out of a necessity of women's survival under patriarchy, and that attracts people even now, whether they're, like I said, cis, intersex, trans, whatever you identify as. People come in and they are embodying this dance that was started by especially black strippers, as we know. But I just think it's so beautiful, and I agree with everything you said. I think pole fit is magic. it is sensual, it is erotic, it is gorgeous. And yeah, I love everything you said, and that's my thoughts back.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It has this intoxicating quality about it, and I think it is exactly what you're saying there, like whether you choose to buy into like the spiritual side of it or the mental well-being side of it, but it really is the same thing at the end of the day. It's this like raw feminine energy, essence, whatever you want to call it, and it's just there is no arguing that is just this like deliciously erotic feminine experience to pole dance. Like just being actually in the experience and doing it in the moment, genuinely dancing. It is so like, oh man, once you can get out of your head, and I know for a lot of people, especially in the beginning of their journey with pole, it's really easy to get quite in your head about it because of what you have seen other people doing or what you sort of perceive pole to be about, you know, whether it's about sexy or strength or whatever. Once you can kind of get out of your head and more into the actual dancing and the movement, there is just nothing like it. Like if I think about the best moments of my life, the most enjoyable, like happy moments of my life, some of those moments are being on stage stripping, like in the strip club. Also, sometimes doing pole dance performances where I'm not in a strip club space, but by far the most obvious happy experiences to me are being on stage, dancing in front of people, and just being lost in the dance at the strip club. Like, genuinely the most fun that I have ever had is doing that right then and there. But yeah, now I'm hear everything that you say as well. I think that we have a very similar experience, but yeah, it differs in some small ways. But our next little question that we have, it's not a question, it's more of a prompt, but it's about our own experience in studios. So I guess I'll start because Vixen, I just made you talk for ages. But yeah, this one I think is going to be a big one for us. So my experience of studios, like I said in how I started pole fit, I started being actually included in studios at a circus school. So the place that I first started working was initially an aerials circus studio that then also created a pole dance studio side. And the reason I say that is because I think that that is a very unique way for a pole dancing studio to begin. I will say that circus people are freaks in the best way. And I think that, yeah, in the best way. And neurodiversity everywhere. Like, I walk in that place and none of us can make eye contact and we have a really hard time saying hello to each other because we're all super neurodiverse. And I think that that being the environment that I started in was really, really good for me, to not feel any sort of way. Yeah, I felt quite comfy from the get-go there. And I think also being that a lot of the people that I was working with at this specific studio were pros as well. It wasn't so much of a hobbyist vibe amongst the employees or contractors. It was a lot more of a pro vibe, which is not necessarily like a good thing or a bad thing. It's kind of an observation, but it definitely changed the vibe of my experience starting to work there. But prior to working there, I had been trying to wriggle my way into pole studios for a while. Like it probably took me like over a year to, maybe even 2 years until I was able to get a job as an instructor. I will say, like, I tried to make a lot of friendships with pole fitness people in Auckland prior to getting that job, and I had a really hard time creating connections. My only real meaningful connection to that industry was my friend Coco, who was just like endlessly supportive throughout. But yeah, my experience trying to kind of make friends was rough. People that I was able to connect with were usually other strippers who also inhabited pole fitness scenes. But I will say, like, I am so incredibly privileged to have been able to use pole fitness as a way to dial back on the amount of sex work that I was doing. I was doing like full-time only stripping for like 4 years, I think. And I went through some really horrendous things, which we'll talk about in another podcast. But and anyone who knows me like personally from this time in my life will be like, oh yeah, I was battling in a huge way, and I really needed to get out of the club full time, and pole fit gave me that opportunity. And it happened fast. I went from 1 studio to 5 studios within the space of about 2 weeks. And yeah, it was intense, and I was really privileged to experience that. And for the most part, I have had quite a good experience in places that I've worked. I have definitely experienced the microaggressions from different people in the industry. Honestly, most of it I've experienced has been from students who don't necessarily know any better, which is frustrating. I wouldn't necessarily say it's understandable, because I would like to think that most people have some common sense around what they're doing in a pole studio and where that probably comes from, but obviously that is probably not the case. But like, yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of horrendous things said to me by students who don't know any better. I've had students that have literally just, like, this is their first few lessons of pole, they're just dipping their toes in, come in and tell me that strippers do nothing on the pole, and that this is nothing like what strippers do, strippers can't do this, blah, 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 all they do is walk around. I've had all kinds of comments like that thrown at me, which is stuff that I'm very, very out about being a stripper. If you don't already know, Madeline is my government name, unfortunately. Something that I would definitely take back if I could, but that is my government name. And so I'm out as all hell, and I tell people that, especially beginners, pretty much from the get-go, because I think it's important that they be exposed to that like pretty soon, pretty early on. And even after that, I will still have some pretty wild comments kind of made to me. And so, yeah, that's always really interesting. I would say my worst experiences with pole fitness studios have definitely been online. I guess online and social media kind of gives you access to spaces that you don't have in real life, which is a good and a bad thing. But yeah, my worst interactions with pole fitness have 100% been online, which is really unfortunate. But that's not to say that in real life it's perfect. I've definitely had some very odd things happen to me in studios. Too many to count, really, or to even recount to you guys. But yeah, but at the same time, like I said, I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed to be able to make as much of my income as I do from pole studios. I have been, how do I explain this? I've been afforded a level of respect in pole studios that I find to be quite interesting or fascinating. I'm not like disillusioned to my skill level. Like, I'm a very, very skilled pole dancer, with in Aotearoa, like a pretty unique style. And I think that because of that, because of people wanting to learn that, I am afforded a level of respect that other S workers are not. I think that people definitely are way more accepting of me because I fit into the box of professional pole dancer than they would be to other S workers who don't fit into that box. Again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or say that I'm incredible and amazing or anything, but I do think it is really interesting to just observe the way that people treat me because of my skill level, as opposed to what they would probably treat me like if I didn't have that skill level. Yeah. I think that's where I'm going to finish that before I go for like a million years, but I'll pass to you, Vixen.
Cool. No, I completely hear what you're saying. You're not tooting your own horn at all. I understand what you're getting at because I kind of have a similar experience with that. So, like I said, I started doing pole fit in Ōtepoti, Dunedin. I was just a civilian wanting to learn pole fit, and then I started stripping, and my instructor started treating me terribly. But then about, I'd say 6 months into my stripping career, I made the choice to move to Tamaki Makaurau because I wanted to, my goal is to be a performance artist, and I had done a few things in Ōtepoti, but there's only so many opportunities down there, and I just wanted to expand my horizons a little more. So I moved to Tamaki Makaurau as VIXEN Temple, but also throughout the last 6 months of my stripping career, I had been building VIXEN Temple blog, and that was becoming quite big on Instagram. I think around this point I had around I don't know, maybe 6,000 followers. I was becoming quite a prominent online activist. Okay, look, listen, Aotearoa has a history of sex work activists, and it is so cool to learn about, and I really recommend looking into our whakapapa because it's gorgeous. But I think I was, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I was one of the first early online sex work activists within Aotearoa. I remember, I think the reason my blog was so successful is there was not a lot of other sex workers in Aotearoa talking so candidly on the internet about their experiences in the industry. And because of that, I had a large stripper following and sex work following. So when I moved to Tamaki Makaurau and started dancing in the club there, I remember one of my first shifts, someone turning to me and being like, "Oh my gosh, you're VIXEN Temple." I was like, "Oh yeah, hi." They're like, "Oh my God, we love you. Like, we read your your blogs a lot in the changing rooms." And it was really sweet. And even the management were like, "Oh my gosh, it's VIXEN Temple. We're so honored to have you work for us." So when I moved to the pole fit studio in Tamaki Makaurau, the same thing happened. I went in to have a consultation, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're VIXEN Temple." And I was like, "Yeah, hi, it's me." And I think I got a little bit intimidated by that because I was quite worried that they would expect me to be really good at pole fit, where I wasn't bad at it, but I was more I'd say my strength is floor work. I wasn't amazing at the tricks and flips and all that. I was still learning. I was like a level 3, I think, when I moved to Tamaki Makaurau. But yeah, I think because of the platform I had and because of who I was and the reputation I had, instructors and other students who knew who I was, I think they were scared. They were very mindful around me. They really were watching what they were saying. So I, like you, I had this very privileged experience in the pole fit world where I think people were not going to say shit around me because they knew that I would fucking pop off on the internet about it. So I, like you, I understand what you're saying. I've had this privileged experience where I think whether it's out of respect or people being intimidated by me, people were very, almost to a point where people, I think, and I understood where they were coming from, but I sort of sometimes got this vibe from civilians coming up to me that they were overly trying to prove that they were "No, I love strippers," and it could be quite okay, I'm just here to train like you, can I not be political for a minute, please? And yeah, it was just, "No, I love strippers so much," and it's sweet, and I understood it, but sometimes it was just okay, I just want to master my invert, please. So but yeah, so my experience in the pole fit studios, when I moved up to Tamaki, okay, here's the thing. So I remember my first few lessons, doing pole fit and doing a move, and the instructors being like, okay, that was an interesting way of doing it. And then they show me the correct way. And I learned, and I know this is going to sound fucking paranoid, but I swear the strip club manager / instructor I had, I swear she was teaching me wrong, because the amount of moves I would do that the instructors in Auckland were like, okay, you're close, but you've just got to slightly adjust this thing ever so slightly. I swear that bitch was trying to sabotage me. She was teaching me the wrong moves, and that's actually fucking dangerous. So my pole fit got better when I was in a pole fit studio in Tamaki Makaurau. So yeah, I had this very good relationship with pole fit, so much so that I really loved it. I wanted to compete. I was really looking to, I wanted to do competitions. I thought maybe one day I could be an instructor. Like, I saw it as very much as others do. It was a lifestyle for me just as much as stripping was. But then when I'd be in the changing rooms at the strip club and, it'd be a slow shift and we're just talking about pole fit, and I would hear other strippers' stories of their experience in pole fit studios, especially strippers who, didn't have white skin, just their experiences of the pole fit studio being a lot different than mine. And that was when I sort of started to clock, oh, I think people act differently around me because of who I am and because I have a platform and I'm a loud, outspoken person. And I think, Madeline, you and I can acknowledge that we're privileged in the sense that we're kind of like, all strippers get shat on by society, but because we're thin and we're white skinned, I think we're more accepted than
100%.
we absolutely, we absolutely are. We don't deal with blatant racism. That I think it was interesting hearing others' experiences and being like, yeah, mine is definitely different. But I'd say, and then I'll wrap this up, but what really changed my relationship towards pole fit, and when I started to have a bit of a sour taste for it, beyond just hearing the not so good experiences of other strippers, it was when in 2021 towards the end of 2020, I went to the sentencing trial of the customer who assaulted me when I was working as a stripper in Ōtepoti. It's one of the reasons I actually left Ōtepoti. That club, I couldn't be there anymore. I would get triggered every time I was there. I needed a fresh start. So I'd been to the sentencing trial, and for those that have been through the justice system, you'd probably agree with me that I swear the justice system of it all is actually more traumatizing than the actual incident itself. You get victim blamed a lot. I was actually victim blamed in the court. They said that, what did the lawyer say? Like, there's a degree to consent already established in strip clubs. So like, are we really going to punish a man for like touching a stripper? So with that, it was 2021. I was stripping full time and processing that trauma, and I was training like 4 times a week regularly. My body has never been in such good shape. I've never been so physically fit in my life. Dancing actually helped me process the trauma. It's quite, ironic that I was assaulted while dancing, but still dancing. I think it was just like a reclamation. But at the club, I was getting triggered again. I was becoming really aggressive towards customers. And the club I was working at the time pulled me aside and was like, we think you need to take some time off because, you're being mean to the customers. So I went on the benefit and I reached out to the pole studio and explained to them, like, I can no longer afford a pole fit membership. So can I please pause mine for a while? And I explained to them what was happening, why, and, I probably went into too much information, but like you said, it's such a community. It almost felt like family to me. I felt like I could open up to them like, hey, look, I was assaulted and now it's not good for me mentally to be in the strip club. I need a break. I'm going on the benefit. I can't afford my membership anymore. And just we're sorry to hear that, let us know when you can afford it again. And it was just this, like, that's right. Pole fit's a community behind a paywall. You have access to it as long as you can afford it. And when I suddenly couldn't afford it anymore, and there was this paywall between me and this thing that I usually do to keep myself alive and fed, I got really depressed. And around this time, I was also deplatformed on VIXEN Temple blog, and I spiraled into a deep depression. I tried to unalive myself, and it was just this realization of like, it's a beautiful community, but at the end of the day, it is an industry that has been commodified. And if you can't afford a pole fit membership, you're on the outskirts. And that was so depressing for me to come to terms with. And it fucked me up. It really fucked me up. So, sorry, that was a lot of rambling, but I think I really wanted to touch on, like you said, my good relationship with pole fit. It was there and it was beautiful, but I have to note that a lot of it, I think, came from who I was and the way that I sort of just, I'm so loud and outspoken. I think people are quite intimidated of me. And then how much that changed when I suddenly lost access to it because I was processing trauma that happened to me in the club. And now this community I was a part of, I was taken away of because I couldn't afford it anymore. And that really opened my eyes up to, like, yeah, this is a community, but at the end of the day, it's an industry. And if I can't afford a membership, I can't be in the community.
I want to like say, as an instructor, what you're kind of touching on is how you realized it was a business. And of course, as an instructor, I'm like super aware that it's a business. And that side of the entire dynamic is often where the problems lie. And it's really unfortunate that like pole fitness has to be a business, because if I think if it was a true community and not a money making business, these things could be handled a lot differently. And unfortunately, people do get lost in the business side of it, and that does suck the mana out of it a lot of times, and it does create this like, yeah, and I get what you mean. It's so jarring to go from being like, these are my friends, this is my friend group, I feel so good here, to them being like, cut and dry. Oh, okay, that sounds good. See you later. That is rough, and I want to just send a lot of love to that version of you, because that sounds like it was a horrendous time for you. But I also want to touch on the comments you made about people being intimidated and kind of like moving differently around you because they knew who you were. I 100% experienced that as well. It's really interesting, and I think it's quite easy to spot when people are being super measured around you. Yeah, I have a lot of very like interesting experiences with people saying things in ways that I can tell they are like very gently testing the waters with me, as if I'm going to either get really aggressive toward them or turn around and tell them off, which I find really interesting, because I'm not really that way inclined. I will tell you the truth and I will be straight with you, but there's really no reason to be intimidated by me. I'm actually quite a silly person. And also, unfortunately, and sometimes to my own detriment, and I'm sure you're this way as well, Vixen, really fucking understanding. Because I can rationalize why some of the beliefs that are held are held. That doesn't mean that I agree with you, or that I think that you're right, or, you know, that it's fair that you think that way. But I also understand the way that we are, as a society, conditioned to be whorephobic as hell. And how there is such a deep lack of understanding and education on whorephobia and S-work within a pole fit space. But the virtue signaling is always a really interesting experience, because, yeah, you can really tell when someone's coming up to you to just rave about sex workers to you. And it's quite odd, because it's almost like you're a famous person and they're like lightly fangirling over you. Not that I think that I understand what being a famous person is, because obviously I don't, but it is really fascinating, and it's very easy to spot when someone's virtue signaling in a way that is quite like disingenuous, or when it is someone who is like genuinely like actually keen to support. Does that kind of make sense?
I hear what you're saying. So there's no way to talk about this without sounding like douchebags, but I think because Aotearoa is a small enough country, there are I think the word micro celebrity almost applies, where like it's such a tiny country that prominent figures within communities I do notice get treated differently than just the average citizen. And as I've been Vixen Temple for 7 years, and as over the years I've done more and I've had a bigger platform, yeah, I can there are instances where I feel people are talking at me like they're trying to prove that they have the same values as me, instead of just having this like back and forth conversation. It's like I'm being monologued at as like this, yeah, I know what you're saying and I agree with it and blah, 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 blah. And sometimes I wish people would just talk to me like a normal person. And oh my gosh, like I feel so fuckama saying that. I feel cringe because I don't look at myself as a celebrity, but I also think it would be quite irresponsible for me to not acknowledge that I am a, I guess the best word, public figure. I'm a known person. I get recognized when I go into certain spaces and people do admire me. I just don't like being put on a pedestal. I don't want people to look up to me because, yeah, that's when I feel that people don't talk to me like a human. They virtue signal around me. And it can be really upsetting when I hear that other people have different experiences with these people. And I don't feel like I really get to know people on a human level. And I think like in the pole fit world, I, I want to get back into, if I could ever afford it again one day, I'd love to get back into it, but I would just, I worry that, yeah, if I enter that space, there's just that people are going to feel like they need to walk on eggshells around me, where it's like, like you said, Madeline, I'm so understanding as to, we have all been raised under a patriarchal white supremacist society. We're all unlearning together. I still have internalized whorephobia and misogyny and racism and things that I'm unlearning myself. And it would be nice to think that I could enter a space and just have people not get like be scared to say the wrong thing around me. They think I'm going to go off at them because I'm not that sort of person. Like I love to have a corridor. I love to unpack that with you. But yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I agree with everything you're saying. Not to sound like douchebags, but yeah, when you are put on a pedestal and admired by people, and intimidated in a way, yeah, you get dehumanized a little bit. I'm already dehumanized a lot just by being a sex worker. So yeah, it's an interesting experience in the pole fit world where I don't always feel like I'm treated the same way that others would be treated. And it would be nice to feel like people aren't walking on eggshells around me. Like, I'm not going to have a go at you. Please. I would love to have a corridor. I might, if you say something ignorant, I'll say, oh, like, maybe like here's a different way of looking at it. But yeah, no, Nama, hear everything you said.
Yeah, I so agree. I think we just have a very similar experience there. And I also want to acknowledge like how it is really weird. And I think both of us as like quite hypersensitive people with some neurospicy brains are definitely observing this a lot more than perhaps we should. But I also want to say it is such a privilege too to be afforded this kind of like, I don't want to call it respect because I don't feel like that's the right word, because I feel like sometimes it's actually kind of the opposite. But there is such a privilege to this sort of like seat that we sit in, I guess. Um, but yeah, it is really fascinating when you can kind of see that someone is definitely like behaving a little different because it's you. And again, I feel like we're going back and forth a little bit on this one, which we should probably stop, but I love a corridor. Like if you have something that you're confused about or something that perhaps you don't realize is whorephobic or anti-S work or just not very respectful to S work, I'm not interested in having an argument with you. I think what we're both interested in is exactly what you just said, Vixen, and it is unpacking. Because a lot of what I think me and Vixen really enjoy about advocacy is just to explain to someone the systems of belief that they may be unaware of. And because especially when things like that are explained to you, it can actually make a lot of sense. And then you go, oh, fuck, yes, I understand now. But because people do sort of like really tiptoe with us, I find I'm not actually often able to have conversations like that. And I love them. Like, yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is like, I want to encourage these conversations more. And obviously that's why we're here with this podcast. But we want to have the corridor. We want you to pay us too. Like, we really want to be, you know, what's the word? Compensated for telling you some of the traumatic things that have happened to us and, you know, all of that. But we really want to have the conversations. We're not interested in just like raging. We want to chat. We want to unpack. We want to like, yeah. I hope that makes sense. But we do have more things to talk about, so we should probably shut up on that front. But so our next prompt on here is our relationship with pole fit as S workers. But I think honestly that really does feed into a lot of what we've already said, but I still think we should touch on it. I think, yeah, I'll let you start, Vixen. You start us off with how you feel your relationship and what is the sort of dynamic with your work in S work and being in a pole fit studio.
Yeah, like, as we've just touched on, we sort of have different experiences with it just by who we are and how people perceive us. But for me, as I mentioned, before I was Vixen Temple, before those days when I was just living in little old Oti-Poti Dunedin, my instructor did start treating me differently when I became a stripper as opposed to when I was just doing pole fit. And I can't help but wonder if that is why maybe over time, like, my relationship to pole fit has become a bit sour because I have all of that unresolved trauma with this person who went from, you know, like, she had a way of like being so motherly and positioning herself as like, because she was a couple of years older than me, maybe like 10 years older than me. And yeah, she was very good at acting like such a mother. But then when I became a stripper, that changed very quickly and she was suddenly the biggest bully in my life. And so as I, over the years, you know, started being Vixen Temple, and then I write, as I mentioned, I write for Trist, and I once wrote an article about how to do pole fit while being a ally to strippers. And I had mixed responses from strippers. I had some strippers love it. I had some strippers say that they are very against pole fit and they didn't agree with me writing that article, and that's completely valid. Strippers are always entitled to their opinion when it comes to anything related to stripping. But yeah, I think I've been out of pole fit since 2021. So I have to be honest and say that I think, you know, acknowledging what I said before, how I left the industry because I was processing trauma from an assault and couldn't afford it anymore. My income since 2021 has been so inconsistent. I've been on and off a benefit. I have not ever since 2021 got into a space where I can have a pole fit membership. And so I have to acknowledge, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just what's happened. My relationship to pole fit has gotten worse over the years. When I see civilian women on the internet wearing our heels and their little thongs and dancing the way that I used to do to make money, and they're being celebrated for it, and they're getting booked for shows, and it does trigger me. I mute a lot of pole fit civilians, or I unfollow them if they don't actually ever speak up about like fired up stilettos or stripping stuff, because it did start to trigger me. Again, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's the reality of what happened to me. I started getting really angry and upset anytime I would see it, especially if they weren't talking about, especially when fired up stilettos started. If you did pole fit and you weren't talking about fired up stilettos, I was like, fuck you. It sucks. And I don't like it. I don't like feeling this way towards a community that I know I once belonged to and felt empowered by. But I just want people to understand that that's where a lot of my criticism towards the industry comes from, is that I think I myself sometimes forget that was a stripper and that I am entitled to having these negative feelings. I sort of gaslight myself out of having them. And I'm like, no, like, I am someone who has been positively and negatively impacted by my experience as being a stripper. And so when I once judged a pole fit competition and the opening showcase was the students, they did this routine and then suddenly they were throwing money on them at the end. I got really angry because I was like, what the fuck does this have to do with the theme that they were doing? I'm not going to say what the theme was. It might out what the student showcase was, but it had nothing to fucking do with making it rain. And then suddenly they're making it rain. And I got really agitated because I'm like, that's how I got assaulted, by someone trying to put a tip in me and then they put their finger in me. Like, you know, so again, I really hope people listening to this who do pole fit understand that I am entitled to having those negative reactions. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, and they're not personal. It's just how I feel. It's sometimes really fucking hard to see civilians on the internet sharing their fucking dancing for everyone to see. It impacts the economy in the strip club because men say, oh, that shit's available online. Why would I fucking pay for it? And then you're posting screenshots of guys messaging you, like offering sugar babying, and you're like, oh my God, like, should I? And it's just, so yeah, that's that. I'll pass back to you, Madeline, because I could ramble about this forever. But yeah, it's something that it's taken me a while to understand that I'm allowed to have these negative feelings. It sucks. It's not personal, but it is how I feel sometimes. It can be really triggering to see you wearing my work uniform without the stigma.
Yeah, kia ora. Like, everything you said is so valid, and I think there are so many people that feel that way, and I think that we forget a lot that, especially those of us who are like more engaged online with pole fitness, that there is a whole sect of sex workers out there who are like completely against pole fit. And I think we forget about them because they're not directly in front of us, and we think that sex workers are either neutral toward pole fit or they love it, when there's a whole other community of sex workers who hate it. And there's nothing wrong with them hating it. They hate it for the exact same reasons that, I know you don't hate it, Vixen, but it's the same thing. It's all relevant to the amount of trauma or exploitation that you've experienced, or abuse that you've experienced in the strip club. It has a direct impact on the way that it informs your thoughts and feelings toward seeing it in this commercial civilian hobby sort of way. And like, I resonate with that deeply. I have such a complicated and complex relationship with pole dancing as a sex worker. When I first tried to get into it, it was really hard, and I definitely felt quite rejected, and I felt like I was working incredibly hard to be a part of an industry that I was really really great at. Like, I was a really amazing pole dancer, and I felt like I was having to prove myself so much more than everyone else. And the beginnings of my actual teaching and instructing in the pole fit space was through my workshop, Flow and Ethics. And so that is sort of immediately how I was perceived, was alongside that advocacy. And whilst that provided me with like a level of protection because of people, like we were saying before, because people were sort of more measured with how they were to me, my eyes were so open to what was happening in the industry, the microaggressions and then just the straight up aggressions, that it's kind of hard for me to not see it. I clock it like so fast, and I clock it when it's happening to me so quickly that it does really complicate how I feel about it. I want to love and thrive in that industry, and it can be really hard sometimes. It can be really, really hard to truly and deeply understand the way that some of the facets of pole fit impact and harm my community, which is sex workers, and still be in there and have to be this like professional and like peppy pole instructor. It can be really hard. And and to be so honest with you, what was it, 2 months ago, me and you, VIXEN, were really going through it. we were really going through it with some stuff online. Calling it stuff feels like a really nice thing to call it. It was complete bullshit. And me and VIXEN were really doing a lot of mahi behind the scenes with that entire situation. And it was, whilst I'm 100% confident in what we did and the work that we did at that time, I back us 100%. It was incredibly taxing. And so to then go to a pole studio, which is my like job, and be in that space was really, it was hard. It wasn't that I didn't want to be there, because I love my students, and like I have curated my career in the pole fit studio to be as pleasant for me as it possibly can be. So I'm specific and selective on what I teach and where I teach. And so it wasn't that I didn't want to be there. It was just a strange experience of having such a big and stressful situation go on with the industry, but still have to exist in it and be professional whilst that industry is directly harming my community. And like, sex workers are still such the minority in a pole studio. There really isn't many of them around. And so when I get them, I'm like, in classes, I'm like, woo, yay, this is so fun. Like, I'm so glad. But yeah, it was difficult to exist in that space, whilst you know things are going on like that. And if I'm honest, that was one really big situation. But there's always something. There's always something that I'm being made aware of. You'll relate to this, VIXEN. Being the people that we are in the seats that we are sitting in means that people bring things to your attention because they want you to like be like, yeah, that's horrible. And I like that. Like, I love it because it keeps me super informed. But it just means that I'm constantly like, I know what's going on in the industry, and I because I'm informed, I understand how messed up it is. And yeah, it is a complicated seat to sit in. And what I was trying to get at earlier about when I'm in a pole studio, strippers really are the minority in the space, which is, you wouldn't think that, but like, and a lot of people will argue that, I find, with, oh, there's heaps of strippers here. And I'm like, well, actually, maybe that might be the case in other countries, but as a pole instructor in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, there really isn't that many. And so I get very excited when there are some. And to be super transparent with you, my offerings are for the sluts. My offerings for pole, be it anything that I teach, it is for the sluts first. Like, I'm doing it for the sex workers. And that has always been the way that I wanted to teach. And I started as teaching strippers before anyone else. But yeah, it's hard to bring offerings like that to a studio and kind of see them like almost fall flat. Do you kind of get what I mean? Like, it's not that they're bad offerings or people don't like them, but kind of in relation to what I said at the beginning about how I started pole and what I was being taught didn't resonate. It's that same thing where when I teach things that are curated a little more for strippers or sex workers, it doesn't translate for hobbyist pole dancers, because so much of the things that we do in the strip club there's intention behind it, and quite often the intention behind it is safety. And so teaching things like that to hobbyists obviously doesn't really hit. But yeah, I think as time goes on, I find it easier and easier to exist in that space and also know what I know about whorephobia and the issues that are faced by sex workers. And I think that because I have become more informed, I no longer enter spaces feeling like I'm just angry, because I'm the same as you, Vixen. When I feel big emotions towards something, I gaslight myself into thinking that I'm just grumpy and angry and that I don't have any right to have these opinions. I'm just traumatized and emotional. But the more I know and the more informed I become, the more I realize that this is a very real and legit systemic issue. And in a pole studio, it may seem like a small thing, but the small things accumulate to this big thing, which has a big impact. And so now, when I do feel myself having a hard time in a pole studio space, I still do it sometimes. I'm not perfect. I'm not healed. I'm not going to say that, but I'm able to go, oh no, this is legit. Like, I'm not just feeling this way because I'm sensitive. I'm feeling this way because it is a legitimate issue. And it gives a sort of like a peace of mind that I'm not necessarily just this pissed off sex worker. And that whole trope is, of course, like so ingrained in us as women prior to becoming sex workers, is that whole angry sex worker trope. But yeah, I don't know. We both have a very complicated experience. I love pole fit. Like I love the space. I love the job. I truly think that the flexibility that I'm offered with pole dancing is so incredibly important. I couldn't do a normal job because of my neurodivergency. I don't think I've tried. I've definitely tried. I don't think I could do a normal classic job, and so I'm so lucky to have what I have from the pole fit industry, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but it is so difficult to exist when your eyes are open in that industry. And I don't mean that to sound like my third eye is open, but like I can see what is happening. I can see the starts of it. I can see the microaggression. And it's difficult because I know a lot of other people don't necessarily see it. And that's not to say that they're bad people. They're not. They're just not as informed as I am. And so, yeah, it's a balance. It's a really interesting balance. And I actually had a student ask me this exact question maybe a year ago during my flow and ethics workshop. And I found it such a cathartic question to answer because no one had ever asked me that before. No one had asked me, how does it feel to exist in this space and do this work? And I was like, wow, that is a really profound question to answer and quite healing to be asked that by someone who does pole fitness, to have someone genuinely have empathy for us just existing in this space that is like, unfortunately and honestly, like inherently harmful to us, whether it be a massive aggression or a small aggression, it harms us. And the feeling of seeing civilians celebrated for the very thing that we are demonized for is so real and so valid, and is the experience of so many people. And again, opportunities, what am I saying? Opinions are super varied within the S-work community. Some people love to see it celebrated. Some people think that that is celebration of sex work. For me personally, I love to see people do pole fit routines, and I love to see the hard work from the students that I have taught or that I know, because I understand how much goes into routines like this. My best friend is a pole fitness diva, and I watched her create her last routine, and she just about went like neurotic. She was going so hectic with it, which I admire so much as an athlete. But there's this, I don't want to call it a boundary, because I don't like to tell people that there are yeses and nos to what you are doing, but there is this level that is sort of crossed where it becomes less about it being a performance piece where you're showcasing your skill and your work and your story, and more about a parody and how do I even explain this? Just a piss take, and just a blatant excuse to copy and be that for the 5 minutes. And that to me is incredibly offensive. It is really hard to sit there as a sex worker knowing what you've been through, the trauma that myself, VIXEN, and a lot of other people in our industry face, and to see civilians get on stage and get an award and a standing ovation for a routine that does exactly pretty much what we would have done on stage, and just seeing the way that is taken into that specific thing, pole dancing, is taken into a context which is deemed to be acceptable, and it is celebrated so much so, whereas us in the club, it is just so the opposite.
I love everything you said, and a final point I want to make, and then we'll wrap up for this episode, but you touched on, acknowledging the strippers out there that are very anti-pole fit and don't think it should exist at all. And it's quite interesting you bring that up, because I go in and out of being that stripper. So, like I said, when I left the industry, and I have not been in it since 2021, there are times where I am so deeply processing my trauma that I hate it so much that I'm like, it shouldn't exist. But then I will talk to strippers like you, have been able to build an income out of it, and I go, oh no, I love it. And then I talk to strippers with negative experiences. I'm like, no, I hate it. And it's really, really jarring and unsettling. And I think the point I wanted to make is that strippers, in my opinion, that are very on the side of pole fit and really encouraging of it, I think should just be considerate of the inherent privilege they have, especially when they feel, that kinship with the pole fit community, because like I said, that community is behind a paywall. So if you have that access to that community, in my eyes, I know people get defensive by the word privilege, but you are privileged to have the financial luxury to afford a pole fit membership to grant you that kinship. And so a lot of the strippers that are against pole fit are usually the most marginalized, who don't have access to that luxury. And that's just something that I've even experienced myself, where I am not working at all and I'm only on a benefit, and I am counting my dollars each week, and I get angry seeing people on the internet doing something and competing, and instructors making, civilian instructors making money doing something that I can't afford. There are times recently, especially in the past couple of months, I've had to steal groceries, and it can be really confronting and upsetting. And I really want to stop gaslighting myself out of that rage. So I really go back and forth between my thoughts on pole fit, and sometimes it's really negative, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's both. And it's because of strippers like you, Madeline, that I do have positive associations with it, because I see what it's done for you and how it's gained you a means of income. And I fucking love that. I love when strippers are making money doing pole fit. It's such a reclamation. That's how it fucking should be, in my opinion. So I just wanted to make that final point. I loved everything you said. Your perspective is so unique because you are an instructor. And that's why I think it's quite cool that we have this contrast, you and me being hosts of this podcast, that you are in the pole fit world. You are creating an income from it. I am out of it. I can't afford it. I think it's really great that we have these two perspectives where, I just think that that's really powerful. And I'm sure that there are people listening that have different opinions. And again, we encourage you to send them in. We would love to hear them. Flick us an email, flick us an Instagram DM. We would love to talk more.
Now we are going to answer a couple of questions that you guys sent to us. We'll see if we can, I think we'll probably only have time for one, but this question is from Anonymous. It says, something that I always think of in regards to instructors is I know it's important to learn from S workers, but then would that be safe for the instructors to out themselves if they're maybe not able to fully out themselves, if that makes sense? Okay, so my perspective, my first thing would be definitely do not go around the studio asking all of the instructors if they're sex workers. That's definitely a massive no-go. I think that the way to go about this would be just to politely listen and learn. And once you do know who is who, then you can support their classes, I guess. There are a lot of out sex workers, and maybe they may not be fully out to the public, like everyone in their family, but they may be out in the studio. And so, yeah, find those instructors and support them. If you have no out instructors at your studio, there are a lot of out instructors who offer online privates. There will be other instructors at other studios that you can go and visit and support. You can just tip those sex workers online if you want. You like their dancing, you see a video that you love, tip them, support them. That is a really good way to do it. When you are shedding the cloak of invisibility that like is the closet, you give up a lot of privileges and you give up a lot of safety. And so, yeah, to support those of them that are out is really important. And that's not to say that closeted sex workers that are instructors deserve any less love, but we can't be pushing them to tell us. We can't be prying, because the biggest reason for the closet is a safety thing. So if we are trying to like push them to tell us who they are so that we can go to their classes, that's inappropriate. Where I think the line is sort of drawn is when it comes to sex work centric opportunities. We should be giving people that are representative of the industry those opportunities. When you shed the invisibility cloak that is the closet, you do lose a lot of safety privileges, because now everyone around you is aware, maybe not everyone, but the people who you have outed yourself are aware that you're a sex worker. And so I do think that whilst we shouldn't be demanding to know which instructors that teach us are S workers and which ones aren't, because we don't want to push anyone out of the closet, I do think that when it comes to opportunities that are for people that represent sex workers, those opportunities are for out sex workers. And so we should be finding the out sex workers and we should be propping them up and supporting them as much as possible, and just allow those who are in the closet to just be safe in the closet. Like, they are there for a reason. We don't need to be like pushing them in any way to find out if they are sex workers. Yeah. And I think that, yeah, putting those who are out and loud, or even just out, doesn't necessarily need to be loud. We should be really supporting them, and they are easy to find because they are, you know, they're telling you. So it shouldn't necessarily be something where you're kind of like just trying to go around and figure out who's a sex worker. That's definitely not great. But yeah, VIXEN, I'll let you jump in there if you want.
Yeah, this is something that I've been asked a lot, because in my article I wrote for Trist about how to do pole fit as a civilian and be an ally to strippers, and it's something I talk about just a lot in regards to my pole fit views. I always say, like, when you can learn from strippers, and I'm often met with like, well, does that mean we have to like out every stripper? And like, does that, like, can I just ask someone if they're a stripper? Like, no, let's just put our critical thinking hats on for a second. So when you do know that someone is a stripper, I would recommend putting your money towards them. But as Madeline touched on, not all strippers are out, and that is due to the stigma that we experience and how dangerous it is to be an out stripper. I think more than anything, yeah, when you can, give your money to a stripper instructor, the ones that are loud and out and proud. But then when it comes to not knowing, and you're you know, at a class where you're like, is this a stripper or a civilian? I'd say a golden rule is like, if the instructor says anything homophobic or anti-stripper, don't give your money to them or call them out on it. Be like, what the fuck? Like, why would you say that? We're literally doing pole that wouldn't exist without stripping. So I think the golden rule is, yeah, when you can, give your money to stripper instructors that you know are strippers. But when in doubt, ignore the whorephobes. Don't give your money to people that will, oh my God, like, what was the cringe thing that used to be said a lot in the like early days of pole fit? Like, no, it was, we're not strippers, we're ninjas, or like,
Oh my God, that's horrible.
I know, that is so
That's
bad.
so cringe.
It's so cringe on so many levels. But yeah, if there's any remarks of like, we're not here to be strippers or we're like athletes or whatever, any little whorephobic remark, just they're probably not the one to learn from. They're probably not a stripper. So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, I guess that's us done, isn't it? I guess that's our ramblings over for this episode. We do have a part 2, so it's sort of similar along the same lines, but we're going to be talking a little bit more about pole dancing events of different kinds. So stay tuned for that one. Thank you to everyone for joining us and kōreroing with us today. As always, our DMs are open. Our stripped and unscripted DMs are open. That is going to be the best way to get in touch with us because we both have slammed DMs on our personal accounts.
Tēnā koutou to you all for listening. We are so excited to see you next week for part 2 of our kōrero around pole fit. But aroha nui to you all, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye.